Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. And my guest this week is a pop star, TV presenter, former child star, Frankie Bridge. And she's here because she's just published this. It's called Open, Why Asking for Help Can Save Your Life. And it's a really brilliant and surprising book because it's very, very open and straightforward about your own experience with mental health from childhood right through to breakdown and afterwards. So thank you very much for coming in to do this.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, why have you done the book, first of all?
I think because one of the biggest things with depression and anxiety is it can make you feel really alone, and you feel like all of these feelings and thoughts that you're having, no one else has ever had the same. And this is my way of kind of putting it out there for anyone that needs it to be able to be like, no, I feel the same. You're not on your own. And there's probably more people than you think.
And it's very, very accessible. I mean, I read it kind of thinking, well, have you written this for teenagers or young people? But actually, as I sort of went further, I thought, well, actually, this is good for anyone.
Yeah, at first, actually, I originally wanted it to be for younger people because I feel like had I have known more about depression and anxiety when I was younger, maybe I wouldn't have ended up having a mental breakdown. But then as time went on, I feel like it is just a general thing, you know, adults and young people suffer from. And I would have had to have left parts out about pregnancy or whatever that were all part of my journey. So it just kind of made sense to... It's for anyone, really.
And how big a decision is it to sort of just lay it all out there? I mean, you know, you've been in reality TV programs about, you know, S Club and the Saturdays and your life, but actually talking about this stuff is different.
Yeah, you know what? I went into it really naively. I knew it was a big deal. I've been asked to write books before and stuff, and I've never really wanted to, you know. But this one... First of all, I didn't want to use a ghostwriter because it's something really personal, and I've never written a book before, so I went into that blindly, thinking that would be easy. Because, you know, I loved writing stories when I was a teenager, totally not the same. And also, I find my mental health really easy to talk about, and it doesn't affect me mentally, but actually writing it down did. And I think it was a mixture of reliving those things, learning new things because I went through my doctor's notes with my therapist and psychiatrist, and also just the pressure of, you know, producing something that I told editors and the public that I was going to produce, and it having to be decent.
And I've been aware actually before talking to people on the podcast about mental health, often with books, that asking people loads of questions about this stuff is in itself, it can be quite difficult. So, I mean, you're on a publicity tour at the moment for this.
Yeah.
And that makes you readdress and rethink and relive quite a lot of the difficult things that you've been through.
It does, yeah. And I think it also makes people feel comfortable to come and speak to me about their issues, which is lovely and is kind of the whole point of the book. But it also, it makes me happy that people feel that they can talk to me, but it also makes me sad that so many people are suffering and so many people don't really know where to go or how to deal with it.
Now, we're recording this in January. In February, hopefully when this is released, we'll be doing this sports relief challenge.
For better or worse.
And the money that's being raised by that challenge is largely going to mental health projects. Is that why you're doing it?
Yeah, definitely. When they asked me, I had actually just got back from trekking the Himalayas.
Oh, wow.
And it was like a day after I'd got back. I think I was in bed and my manager rang me and she said, oh, we've got this thing. And I just laughed. I was like, are you serious? I've just climbed the Himalayas. But actually, the good thing about these challenges, they're so far out of my comfort zone that they tick all of my anxiety boxes. And I love proving my anxiety wrong. And every time I do that, it gives me confidence to do that again. So there's that, obviously, for myself. And also, 100%, it's all to raise awareness for mental health. And how could I say no? Because that's what I'm all about.
One of the reasons I've said yes to it is because we have a lot of conversations about mental health at the moment. And And lots of people are doing interviews like you are about their own lives. And politicians say, yes, we must treat mental health just the way we do physical health. But I still feel there's a massive gap and that a lot of it is talk.
Yeah.
And that the reality hasn't really caught up.
It hasn't
with
at
the
all.
talk.
No, I'm an ambassador for Mind, and actually at their last Mind Awards, the big thing that everyone was talking about was, okay, we've got everyone to this stage where people are feeling like they can talk about it. The stigma's starting to go a bit. People are now asking for help, but the help isn't there. So now there's that next hurdle that we need to get over, and I do think we will. I hope we will, but I don't know how that's going to be achieved.
Well, let's talk about your experience. I mean, in the book, you talk about your worries as a child. I mean, have you always had worries as far back as you can remember?
Yeah, I always say I came out of the womb anxious. People, where I've been doing a lot of interviews about the book, they're like, well, there must have been something that happened in your life that started this. And there honestly wasn't. I had a happy childhood. My parents were around. And it just is me. I feel like it's my personality. I overthink everything. And I just manage to find the bad in any situation. And I've just always been that way.
But you weren't depressed as a young child.
No.
You were just you were anxious.
Yeah. I was just anxious. We'd book a holiday and I'd be worrying about that flight for the year leading up to that holiday. Or I think a lot of it came from also worrying about everyone else around me. Mum, dad, my sister happy? Is everyone healthy? And yeah, when I look at it now, I feel a bit sad for the fact that I was so young and I thought so deeply about everything, but it just was who I was.
Why does somebody who is outwardly so confident and can sing and dance and perform and could do from a very young age, how can that be compatible with also having these crippling worries?
I have no idea. I ask myself this all the time. Sometimes I think maybe it's partly to do with being on stage and being able to kind of be a version of yourself, pretending to kind of be confident. And then also, I think a lot of it comes with that praise and need to be liked almost, and there's no bigger way to get that than standing on a stage and people clapping and cheering. I think that's not why I got into it, because I was so young. I don't think I thought about it that much, and I just enjoyed it. And then I've just kind of fell into it from there on, because I do think a lot of people in our industry are quite like that. Normally they're quite shy when you meet them outside of a work situation, and I don't know.
Because you were very young when you started doing professional
stuff. I was 12, yeah.
So how did that happen?
Well, I used to go to just a local dance school, and then the teacher there pulled my parents in one day and said, we think you should send her to a stage school. And so my parents, they were a bit shocked, asked me if I would like to go, and I was like, yeah, okay. But obviously it was expensive and they were concerned that I'd go and then not enjoy it. So I joined a local stage school, and then the plan was, when you go to secondary school, you can audition for Sylvia Young, Italia Conti or whatever. But then this open audition for S Club Juniors came about on CBBC, and just the night before, I was like, should we go for it? And we did, and then I got in. So there wasn't that much thought that went into it. I wasn't like, when I was younger, it was, you're either going to be in musical theatre or like a cheese string advert. There was no like, no one became pop stars. There was no pop idol or anything.
And S Club Juniors was sort of a brand spin-off of S Club 7.
Yeah.
Well, did it have a reality TV series around it from the beginning, or was that something that grew?
Yeah, so they followed us from the beginning. So from the auditions, CBBS followed us through all of that stage, and then continued to do so throughout the first couple of years of our career. I don't actually know how long they did it for.
So how pressured an existence was that for a 12-year-old?
It wasn't, because there was no social media. And where we were so young, people weren't allowed to write about us. There was no Daily Mail where things were uploaded instantly. So I just had no idea. I was just in this bubble of not going to school and loving my life. Like, we were tutored, but, I was just doing what I loved. And Simon Fuller was very strict on who was around us. We never chopped or changed, like, our team. So I felt really secure and safe. And I said, when you're that young, you just... Like, I had no idea how successful we were until afterwards. And I think that's quite nice.
Because S Club Juniors became S Club 8.
Yeah.
And so you're performing all the time and doing stadiums and arenas?
Yeah, we did arena tours. That was like one of the first things we did.
I mean, so what I mean is, you know, do you think the pressure of all of that had anything to do with your mental health?
No.
Which is weird, isn't it? You know,
I know. I don't know. Who knows? I think because I was already that way inclined, I think either way, whatever career I ended up in or whatever relationship I ended up in, maybe I would have ended up having a breakdown or developing depression further down the line just for different reasons. But I do think, obviously, being in the public eye, being written about, spoken about, people's opinions being thrown at you all the time, it obviously, if you're a person that already overthinks what people think of you, it's going to make that worse.
But that was something that came later on.
Yeah, S Club Juniors, definitely not.
So at what point did you start seeing psychologists and doctors and thinking about medication?
It wasn't until I was in the Saturdays, quite early on.
So how old were you when you joined the Saturdays?
I think I was 17. I'm so rubbish with timelines. I think it was about 17 or 18 because we were together for about a year before anyone even knew about us. And we were really exhausted after doing, you know, you do all that, the clubs and the unis and whatever. And it was quite a big shock because in S Club Juniors, you're only allowed to work 5 days a week, certain amount of hours a day. You're only allowed to be on camera for a certain amount of hours, and you have chaperones that stay on top of all of that. And obviously, being a child, I couldn't wait to grow up, and I hated having a chaperone there. And then in the Saturdays, I was like, give me a chaperone, you know, I want to be able to only work a certain amount of times. And so that was a big shock, I think, going from that changeover. And I went to the doctors just thinking I was exhausted, and he suggested I go and see a therapist. And I just thought, what is he talking about? For me, a therapist was for like crazy people, and I wasn't crazy and I was fine. But then I think for about a year after that, I started noticing that I was able to function at work. But the minute I got home, I was just a crying mess.
Because with the Saturdays also came adulthood and being able to live hard, party hard, relationships, all of that.
Yeah, and I think that was a big part of it as well. You know, you're working really hard. You are going out after work and staying up late, or, you know, trying to navigate relationships in the public eye as a teenager. They're hard anyway. And then with everyone talking about you at the same time. So yeah, it was a weird part of life, but it took me a long time to realize what was going on with me mentally.
At what point do you start to realize that you need more help?
I think me and my boyfriend at the time just kind of realized that I was just literally coming home. I was unable to have conversation. I wasn't hungry. I didn't want to eat. I just wanted to get in bed and cry myself to sleep. And after a while, we were like, that's not normal, obviously. But you just put it down. You just make excuses for it. So
a lot. I mean, when you say cry yourself to sleep, I mean, would that happen from time to time, or was that
like
a regular
pretty
thing?
much, yeah, pretty much nightly.
Every night.
Yeah, and then
So
getting
you're
up in
being
the
a sort
morning
of pop star by day and being interviewed and doing photo shoots and smiling away, and then crying at night.
Yeah, it's weird how good you are at hiding it. I suppose it's a bit like people with addictions; they're just so good at hiding it. So then when I first went to the doctors, it was kind of a relief, but it took me a long time to find my groove. Like, I didn't really like my therapist at first. I refused medication at first because I didn't think I needed it. Because again, that to me would seem a failure at that time. So it took me a long time to accept it.
Well, you write about that, don't you? I mean, why would going on medication be a failure?
Because I think a lot of people have a lot of opinions on antidepressants, and I think it's changed a little bit now, but not massively. And that's why I'm so open about the fact that I have and still do take medication. I'm not saying everyone needs to take it and it works for everyone. It doesn't. But if you need it, you shouldn't feel ashamed about it. And people have this notion that you can't be on it forever. And my doctor's just always been like, well, you wouldn't expect someone that's diabetic or an asthmatic to come off of their medication, so why are you any different? And I didn't have an answer for that. So
how did you get over that feeling to then decide to give it a try?
Because the therapy just wasn't working. I think I'd done it for quite a few months and I didn't feel any better. If anything, I was probably getting worse. And I just thought, I just didn't want to feel like that anymore. I wanted to be able to enjoy what I was doing. And
do you think the therapy was the wrong therapy, or had the wrong therapists?
I think the therapy helped, obviously. I had to get stuff off my chest, but yeah, it wasn't the right therapist. I then moved to a different therapist, and that's the one that's in my book. And I think people just assume you go to one and they're the right one, and it's not the case.
Because you also mentioned, feeling like the cliche of the young star who can't handle the fame.
Yeah, I hated that because I don't know, it's just embarrassing. I just felt like people were just going to be like, oh God, there's another one, poor little rich girl or whatever. And obviously I wasn't anyway, but I just felt like I was walking into giving people an excuse to put me down and judge me, I suppose.
But did you feel that way about yourself? Or
Yeah.
Or was that what... Yes, you did.
Well, I was just disappointed in myself because I had what I'd always wanted. I loved singing and I loved dancing, I loved performing, and I loved my job. So...
And you were doing really well. I mean, you were getting top 10 hits and top 10 albums.
And this was my second round of it as well. I was like, who gets that opportunity to do it twice? And don't get me wrong, I worked hard, but I was very lucky and I knew that. So, a lot with depression and anxiety is that feeling of guilt over so many things. And I felt, and still do sometimes, so much guilt about the fact that I was doing what so many people would love to do and what I had always wanted to do, but I was still fundamentally unhappy.
I mean, that's often the way, though, isn't it? I mean, you see so many people who are successful, attractive, whatever it might be, and you say, but you've got so many reasons to feel amazing.
Yeah.
So at what point were you able to sort of say, it's okay for me to feel like that?
It wasn't until after I'd been into hospital, to be honest. So it took me having a full-on mental breakdown, being hospitalised for a month, and then probably still not until a good few years after that, because I wasn't fixed the minute I came out. And it's only really now, I think, that I'm getting older and I'm, a lot more years down the line from that stage of my life that I can say, well, it's an illness. It is what it is. And I've still managed all these amazing things whilst going through that. And a lot of the time with anxiety and depression, you feel like you're weak. But on good days, like today, I can say, actually, I must be pretty blooming strong because I managed to forge 2 pop careers, have a husband and 2 kids whilst going through all of that.
I mean, you say it took a break. You had your breakdown. What was the breakdown? What is a breakdown?
I don't know what it is for other people, but I think it's normally when you physically and mentally can't cope with life anymore, or day-to-day life. And I'd got to the point where I just couldn't. Like the crying started again all the time, and I just was so lost. I didn't know who I was. What I wanted, really. I couldn't make any decisions. I just couldn't cope, really. And it was getting to the point where at work I was almost having to switch on Frankie from the Saturdays to become this person that people were expecting. And then I'd switch off once I got home. And I don't know how I managed to keep it up at work. It's weird, but...
So was there a point at which you couldn't switch it on anymore?
Yeah. We had... I was still managing to work, but at home, Wayne and my husband and we'd had this row because I was crying. I'd got to a point then I was saying things like, I don't want to be here anymore. Everything would be better for everyone if I just died, and which is pretty scary for someone to hear. And he called my GP. She came over the next day. And it was just before I was supposed to be going away to record a music video for 2 days. And she rang my psychiatrist and he was like, she needs to go into hospital. And I was ready by that point because I was just so tired. It's so tiring trying to pretend to be pretty much pretending to be someone else 24/7 or however long I was at work for every day. And then getting home and just collapsing and just feeling like you don't want to go on anymore. And it felt nice to take that pressure off of myself and let someone else kind of take responsibility for me. Scary, but also a relief.
So you shot a music video,
Yeah, so
having decided that you were going to go into hospital.
yeah, so we decided I was going to go in and we rang my manager because there's never a good time in a pop group schedule to take time out, it just doesn't exist.
And there's a lot of other people
Yeah,
involved.
it's not like I'm a solo artist either. I'm letting down 4 other people. And we'd booked this video to record away.
In Iceland.
In Iceland, yeah. So for me to pull out of that, 1, it would throw off the whole single plan. 2, we'd probably lose loads of money or whatever. So we agreed I would go and do that as my last job and then fly back and I'd go into hospital. But the girls didn't know at that point, and it was only my manager that knew. And I felt slightly better because I knew that I was going to come back and go into hospital. But it felt excruciating to have to go and just do that last final thing. Luckily for me, it was like quite a sad and moody video, so it was fine. But yeah, no one else would have known.
So what do you think when you watch that video?
I just think it's really sad. I look, to me, I feel like I just kind of look dead behind the eyes. Probably to anyone else, they probably wouldn't know any different. But yeah, it was a really weird time. It's like you're just running on autopilot. I'm doing what everyone's telling me to do. I can still do a music video, but I'm just like a body, basically.
I mean, one of the really great things about this book is it's just written very simply and it tells you exactly what happened. And what you talk about going into hospital is just being doped up, which is what they do when you go into hospital. They just give you loads of drugs.
Yeah, which was great.
But what's the point of that? Why are they doing that?
I think my psychiatrist has always said to me he can't deal with my depression or anxiety until he sorts out my tiredness, because when you're tired, you can't sort anything out. So for me, until that point, I hadn't been sleeping at all, really. It took me so long to fall asleep because my mind was always racing. And then once I was asleep, I wouldn't stay asleep for very long. So I think a lot of that was sleeping tablets to get me to sleep and calm down. And also they're trying to figure out what antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication works for you. And I suppose you come in at such a low point that they have to start everything at such a high dose and then sort it all out.
And are you okay with how you felt? I mean, it really reminded me of a friend of mine who went into hospital and under similar circumstances, and I went to visit her. And in fact, you talk about friends saying they'd come to visit you or family and you not really remembering.
Yeah, no idea.
So God knows whether she remembers me going. But I remember her being totally sort of doped up but finding it very difficult because she didn't, she couldn't get in touch with herself. She didn't feel herself.
I don't remember feeling like that. I think all I felt was just relief and exhaustion. I just was willing to hand myself over, and whatever they decided, I was happy to go with, basically.
And so why did hospital achieve what seeing doctors and psychotherapists outside hospital not achieve?
I think it gave me that time because had I not have gone in, I would have still been working, maybe slightly less, but I would still have to have managed to live in the outside world, which was something that I wasn't able to cope with anymore. And I think the nice thing about being in hospital was that I was surrounded by people in the same situation as me. So there was no judgment or pretense there anymore. It was, we're all here, we're all in the same boat. Some people were worse than me, which was quite a nice relief for me. You could talk about medication openly and there was no secret in that.
And yet you weren't able to stay in hospital for as long as the doctors thought you should.
No.
Because of work?
Yes, because we had a tour booked. I was desperate to do it. That's like my favourite part of being in a band is we'd sold an arena tour. People had paid to come and see us. And I love performing. And also, insurance-wise, we wouldn't have been covered had I have not done it. But for me, that wasn't really the reason. And I wasn't forced to do it. And I think, if anything, the doctors probably didn't really want me to. But again, I think it would have made me feel worse had I not have done it, because A, I would have been missing out on it, and B, I would have felt like I'd let so many people down. So it was a toss-up of what one you were going to go for, really. But I loved it.
Have you been in control of your career, do you think? Or have you just kind of done whatever came along?
No, I've definitely not been in control. And I think that's where a lot of the issue comes from, which I only realised as I was writing the book. Because, in S Club Juniors, in a lovely way, I had no control over my life because we were very well looked after. And in the same in the Saturdays, it wasn't like people weren't nice, but you were told when you're being picked up, what you're doing that day, when you can have breakfast, lunch and dinner. You've got asked to go to the toilet because you might miss something.
Really?
Well, not like there's not a rule like you have to ask.
Put your
but,
hand up.
It's like if I was coming on here, so you've got to say to someone, oh, is it all right if I go to the loo? And that's the same in anyone's life, but all day, every day. Or when you're going to get some time off, or you miss most people's weddings, christenings, parties, whatever.
And creatively, I mean, presumably pretty controlled as well.
Yeah, we released singles that I loved some of them and didn't love others. And that's quite hard, having to sit on a morning TV show and say, buy our single, it's great. And you don't really like that one.
So it really was a job.
It was a job, yeah. But one that I loved as well. Like, I make it sound really bad. I did love it. And I miss it now.
I mean, I was going to ask you that. I mean, for somebody who wanted to sort of perform and sing and dance and be on stage, it's taken you a long time in your career to do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, the Saturdays kind of fell into that as well, because I'd spoken to, so it was the same record label that did S Club Juniors, and I'd kind of gone away, was, kind of leading a normal life. Like, I worked in a bar, worked in a shop for a while. And for me, that was a bit of a novelty, I suppose. And then all my friends started going to uni, and I was like, well, what the hell am I going to do? So I rang the label and was like, I think I want to get back into music. And I was away, and I got a phone call, oh, we're putting together a band, would you come in and meet us? So I was like, okay. So I went and met them, and didn't particularly want to be in another band, but there was nothing else going on. So I was like, okay. And I came out of that meeting and said to my friends, I was like, I think I'm in a girl band. And they were like, what do you mean you think? I was like, I don't really know. I just think I might be. So yeah, I mean, as I say, I fell into it, but obviously I still had to do the work.
And I mean, you must have been aware of, I mean, people are very scornful about manufactured bands and all of that kind of stuff. So how did you feel about that?
I don't really care, to be honest. I feel like people are so judgy about something so silly. Because, yeah, we were manufactured in a sense, but it didn't make our music any less good if you liked the song or whatever. And we were still the ones that made that band. It was our chemistry together, and we had to sell that band, I suppose. So I get it. We didn't write the music, but it was still good music, or people still bought it. And we were never claimed to be anything other.
Yeah. But is there sort of less passion or less integrity in a band like that, in a group like that, than, a rock and roll band that starts in a garage that struggles for 10 years and then gets discovered somewhere?
Well, there's less integrity, but that's other people's opinion of it, I suppose. And that's just the way the world works. And that's fair enough. Like, we didn't write the music or whatever. But for me, there was not less passion. You still want it to succeed. You still want it to do well. I suppose if you're standing there and singing a song about an ex or whatever that and you felt really passionately about the lyrics and stuff, yeah, that would be more passionate, I guess. But I never had any want to write songs, so it didn't really bother me.
Would you recommend it as a career? Would you say to friends whose kids are thinking about their futures, yeah, it's great, I did it, have a good, or would you say, don't, have a normal childhood?
I'm always so split because obviously I've got 2 kids and people always say to me, "What would you say if they said they wanted to do the same thing?" And I don't know because my parents were in that awkward position when I got into S Club Juniors. Obviously, it was down to them whether I did it or not, and they basically had to hand me over to Simon Fuller and trust them to look after me. And that was a big thing for them because A, they had to hand over their child at the age of 12, take them out of school, of normality, and B, if they didn't let me, would I then resent them for the rest of my life? And I think I would be in exactly the same position with my kids. I would never push them into it, that's for sure, because my parents never pushed me into that industry at all. Um, I would like them to have an interest in it. Um, but I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to encourage them to do it just because it's just hard.
I mean, you must have seen a lot of pushy parents along the way
Oh
at
God,
those
yeah.
auditions and everything.
Yeah, and I'm married to a footballer as well. So like he's been around that. Like we see a lot of it at school around sport and stuff like that. And his parents weren't pushy at all either. So it's not in our DNA to be like that. And had my parents been, maybe I wouldn't have really wanted to do it. I don't know. So yeah, I like to think I would never be like that with the boys. If they desperately wanted to do it, I would obviously help them. But you have to be strong enough to be able to take the knockbacks, and it is harder now. You have to kind of go as a whole package. Back when I was younger, they'd kind of take you on and figure out what you're going to do and give you music and stuff like that. Now you have to basically do all the work for the record label and then they just put you out there.
Because the other thing you say in the book is that you, very young, really, were very clear that you wanted to get married and be a young mum.
Yeah.
What, I mean, why is that, given you were having such an extraordinary life?
I think...
or is it because of that you wanted some normality?
I think it was. I think there was a part of me that I'd always wanted to be a young mum because one of my best friends, his mum was really young when she had them, and we used to spend a lot of time around their house, and their relationship and our relationship with her was just great. And
young parents are more fun.
Well,
yeah, no, I say that as the old git, but yeah.
But she just seemed more on our level, and I was like, oh, I really want to. That was like a young, take on it. Like, oh, I'd really like to, completely forgetting all the hard stuff that she'd done before that. So I'd had that in my head anyway, and then I think I always had this thing of, I want to be successful, but I don't want to get to a time in my life where I would possibly, I mean, I'm not, but possibly really rich and sitting in this big house, but lonely. And I never wanted that. Not that I would have rushed it if I, hadn't met someone, but I was aware that, yeah, I wanted to be young. And all my family knew it as well. I've got an older sister. I've got family friends that are all older than me that I grew up with that we're all really close to. And they're like in their mid-30s now, and they're only just starting to have kids and get married.
I mean, you really bucked the trend.
I know, yeah. And they're all like, but we knew you would be young. We knew you'd be first. And had any of my mates from school, because I've still got all my friends from school, have said when they were 24, I'm having a baby, I'd have been like, what are you doing? Because it was me, everyone was just like, oh, okay.
Especially being in a band. It's like, it's the last thing you expect, really, sort of.
Yeah, but I think as the Saturdays, we were all so aware that it's going to end one day. And also for all of us, luckily, as a five, family came first. And none of us really, we wouldn't have stopped each other from doing that because it's more important. And you can carry on.
And how important is work to you now? Because, I mean, you say you couldn't imagine what your role is without work.
Yeah, I am. I'm definitely someone that needs to work. And I don't know whether that comes from having done it from such a young age or just that's just how I am. Both my parents have always worked and I don't really know much different. And now I am in a position where I can do things like write a book and raise awareness for things. And that is nice as well.
I mean, tell me about the charities that you've backed, because you're involved with Mind.
Yeah.
But also with Marie Curie Cancer. So why have you chosen those two?
Marie Curie just came about because the Saturdays we'd done quite a lot with them. And then they came to me with this campaign with Superdrug. And for me, it seemed like a great campaign because I wasn't having to ask people to buy things or give or pay for things that they didn't need. You know, you go in Superdrug, you buy items like toothpaste and whatever, and they're things you'd already buy and you're doing a good thing.
And mind purely because of your own experience, presumably.
Yeah, so I joined with Mind like years ago when it was still really small. It was pretty much me and Stephen Fry, I think, at the beginning. And even the Mind Awards was in this tiny theatre and no one really came to it and whatever. And now that's grown every year. And even that in itself just proves how far mental health has come.
So are you still, I mean, people don't just get over these things, do they?
No, some people do. Some people
they?
can be cured almost. I think if it's circumstantial depression or anxiety, you can. Sometimes it doesn't come back. I mean, it's more likely it will. But for me, no, mine's chemical imbalance. It'll always be there. And I have untreatable depression as well. So
What's that?
it's where it's treatment resistant depression. So when I try new medications, they'll work for a while and then it's like my body kind of gets used to it. It stops working, so we have to up it. And then I end up on a dosage of what you would put a man on or whatever. And then we have to mix other ones together. And then that will happen again with the next medication. And so it just, I don't know why it does that. But it does. It's really frustrating.
So does that mean you do keep trying new medications?
Yeah.
Or you
Yeah.
stop when you say it's untreatable?
Well, no.
Untreatable sounds a bit hopeless.
I know.
Is that what they call it? Or is that what you're calling it?
No, it's what did I just say it was? Treatment
Untreatable?
resistant.
Right, okay.
Treatment resistant, which means the same thing. Yeah, so I'm on a medication now that has worked for me for quite a few years. It has the least amount of side effects, but I still have my days. Like a few weeks ago, I had a day where I just couldn't get out of bed that day and deal with life or whatever. And it is frustrating. I do get frustrated now, and I have had times where I've got frustrated with Mike, my psychiatrist in the book, because I remember thinking, oh, so no one, like I always kind of say, oh, my level of happiness is here, normal people's is here, if it was in like the same situation. And I said, oh, well, that's how it always is though, Mike, right? Like, because I have depression, that's how it would always be. And he was like, no. Most people, they can, when they get the right medication and treatment, they can match that. But unfortunately, not for you. And that really shocked me. And I was a bit pissed off, to be honest. I was a bit annoyed because I was like, I kind of do everything I'm told to do and I'm still in this situation. But now I'm kind of like, well, 9 times out of 10, I'm fine. And I give in to the feelings more. So if I'm having a bad day, I let myself have a bad day. And then I find I get out of it quicker and move on quicker.
Is there a different way of thinking about your depression or your anxiety that you have now, having spent time on this in hospital and all the rest of it, that enables you to cope better? You know, is there a simple tip?
I wish there was. Not really. I think the main things that I say to people is the obvious ones of talk to someone, whether it's just one person. It doesn't have to be a professional, even if you have a friend that's aware of how you feel. And I find that now, if I'm feeling rubbish, if I don't tell my husband, I'll text one of my mates, and it just makes me feel better. And also to lean into the feelings sometimes, because the more you push them down and the more you try and ignore them, they just manifest and get worse and worse and worse and worse until you can't cope anymore.
And what would you advise your younger self, your 12-year-old self now?
2 things. I'd say speak to someone, and I'd tell myself that things do get better, because they have. I don't know, because I didn't understand it when I was 12, so it'd be hard.
I mean, you're also astonishingly open in the book about how you feel about your kids and having depression, and as a wife. What can you say about that? I mean, you talk about your guilt in the book.
Yeah. Guilt, as I said, is a massive part of the illness, and also I think just the way that I am anyway. And I do feel guilty because they're people that I love more than anything, and all I want is for them to have the happiest life possible. And I don't feel like I can always provide exactly what I want to. And that makes me feel guilty because I don't want my kids to ever look back and question my love for them. And the same for Wayne, because he has to really, he gets the worst of it because he's my husband, like your partner always seems to get the worst parts of you. And he has to, throughout our whole relationship, battle with not taking it personally or having to deal with my down days and things like that. And, we all know people around you and the way people are does affect you and your mood. And sometimes I think, oh, he could have been with someone that was not like that.
But do you also find a way to tell yourself that feeling guilty is also wrong?
Yeah, I can do that more now. Like it's so weird. The brain is just insane because I feel all those things and all that guilt, but I also have that side of my brain that knows that that's not really true. And it just depends which one wins on what day to what I'm feeling, really.
And you just kind of got to accept that sort of struggle to some degree, have you?
Yeah.
Sometimes one side will win and sometimes the other.
Yeah. And I think that is a lot of it is acceptance and just that just that acceptance of like, I'm not looking at it as looking at it as something that needs to be fixed. It's more like something to be managed. And that's what I kind of do on a daily basis is manage it rather than thinking, right, this needs to all go away. And then you feel rubbish because it doesn't.
I mean, that's a very male response to these sorts of things, isn't it? I mean, men usually kind of want to fix it.
Yeah. And Wayne's very good at not doing that. He just will give me a hug or like the day that I spent in bed, I was able to do that because he took the kids out to the park and then took them for lunch, whatever, and then took them in the garden when they got home. And they were happy as Larry. They didn't care where I was, they were having a great time. And then that meant that I had the time that I needed to kind of wallow in my sadness for a few hours. And then by like 5 o'clock, I was up downstairs joining in with the boys outside and still didn't feel 100%, but he gives me that opportunity to be able to get through that without being like, right, come on, let's do this. No, you're fine. Just get up. Like he did text me and say, maybe you should go out for a walk/run. But that's not him being pushy or whatever. And I just said, yeah, I'll try. And he texted me a bit later, oh, did you manage it? No. And he was like, okay, we'll be home soon. It's not like, why didn't you do that? That will make you feel better,
You also, I mean, you also swim in those murky waters of social media that are terrible for mental health. You are regarded as an influencer. You've got 1 million followers or more on Instagram and Twitter and all of these things. I mean, is that just a necessity? Is that part of the job and who you are? Or is that something you actually enjoy?
No, it took me a long time to accept Instagram. I was already on Twitter. And Instagram for me at the beginning was just an annoyance because I was like, well, I already give a lot of myself over in interviews and work or whatever and on Twitter at the time. And I was like, oh, it's just another thing that I've got to think about. And at the time I was like, selfies are so self-indulgent. It's like, oh, look, I look good today, so I'm going to post this picture. And I just couldn't get my head around that at the time. And then life happens. It became a more normal thing. I became self-employed and it became very apparent that a lot of jobs were based on, at the time, how many followers you had, what kind of stuff you put up and all that jazz. And so I had to get on board. I didn't really have a choice. And I fall in and out of love with it, like I do. It's kind of part of the reason why the book came around because I chose to be a bit more open and honest about how I was feeling sometimes. And the response I got made other people feel better, but it also made me feel better. So that side of it is nice. And obviously I can earn money out of it and that's great. But then sometimes I feel like a bit of a hypocrite because I want people to feel good about themselves. But then I'm posting stuff about having a great day or whatever. But I've kind of taught myself that, if that girl that I'm following that looks amazing in that bikini or whatever, how she makes me feel about myself is more about me than her. And I think a lot of people need to kind of learn that somewhere down the line, is that just because someone else is having a great day and they're posting it. That's not a direct stab at you to say, oh, you're worthless and you're having a rubbish day and look how great my life is. Why can't she say she's having a great day if she's having a great day? But my thing is, if you have to have light and shade, and that's what I try to portray on mine. I try.
It's a delicate relationship. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
and I'm so pleased that I didn't have that in S Club Juniors, and I didn't have it in the beginning of Saturdays, and I didn't have it at school, and that's nice.
Well, I mean, look, I think, people who read that book are going to find it very helpful,
I hope so.
whether they are sufferers themselves or know somebody who's going through a tough time. Everybody who comes on here gets to sort of change the world a way they would like to.
Yeah.
How would you change the world?
Oh, I told you I was going to think about this, and I didn't.
Or would you
I
take
change the
away? I mean,
world?
would you just take it away as a problem?
Obviously, I would love to. That would be one thing that I would love to change. But then I'm one of those people like, well, if I'm going to take that away, then I would have to take away all illness. You can't have one and take one and not all the others. So obviously I would love that. It is a hard one for people to understand. So okay, I'll take that away. I would love to know what life is like without it. I would love to know that level of happiness that other people know. And I'd like to give that to other people.
Frankie Bridge, thank you very much indeed for coming in to share
Thank
your
you.
ways to change the world and talking about your life in such an open way. It's really fantastic. And the book is called Open, Why Asking for Help Can Save Your Life. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, then please do give us a rating and a review. You can watch all of these interviews on the Channel 4 News YouTube channel. Our producer is Rachel Evans. Until next time, bye-bye.